All right, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. You are live and direct with your Akazaki Yahoo, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa, Baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait till the day that the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, and back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Yes, indeed. I am joined this afternoon by my most esteemed Aki Anaya. Shabbat Shalom, Aki.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Aki. Shabbaton Yasharal. Kwam Yasharala.
Hallelujah. Happy Sabbath, Yisrael. Yashar. Rise, Yisrael. Rise. It's time to rise, Yisrael. It's time for us to get up and get at it. Get to working, walking in the way of the Most High and keeping his ways. And man, it's time to get this thing right. You know, we've been getting it wrong for far too long. It's time to get it right now. So praises to the Abba. We are back for another video review. And we're going to jump into this review real quick. We got a double header for you. First off, we have the story of Walter White, a black man who passed as white. And this comes to us from our good brothers over at Black Journals. Shout out to those brothers doing great work. And looking forward to this video review. We'll begin here.
I am a Negro. My skin is white, my eyes are blue, my hair is blonde. The traits of my race are nowhere visible upon me,
said Walter White in his biography. He was taunted and jeered as neither white nor black by some of his peers in his childhood to young adulthood, especially while he attended Atlanta public schools, finishing at Atlanta University High School in 1912 and then Atlanta University College in 1916. By the way, Atlanta University, which was chartered in 1867 and opened to 89 students in the spring of 1869, was founded by Yale graduate Edmund A. Ware under the direction of the American Missionary Association, with 3 goals for the new school, which were to develop individual Negro talent, to provide inspiration and leadership for Negro communities, and to train teachers. So, you can guess the dilemma of a supposedly young Negro boy with fair skin color and other features of a white person. Even his last name didn't help matters. Although Walter's physical appearance was that of a white person, he never denied his black heritage. At the age of 8, he threw a rock at a white kid who called him a derogatory name because he was drinking from the black water fountain. As such, he was no stranger to segregation of the time, but perhaps his most remarkable experience was Atlanta race mass killing of 1906, one of the Atlanta riots that broke out between 1898 and 1906. As part of a pattern of anti-black violence that included several hundred lynchings each year. Walter himself called it one of the most savage race riots in those years, which erupted on September 22 after vague reports of African Americans harassing white women. Over 5 days, as many as 25 to 40 African Americans were killed, one of whom was a woman who died of a heart attack after seeing the mob outside her home, while only 2 whites died, and Atlanta's police did nothing to protect black citizens, going so far as to confiscate guns from black Atlantans while allowing whites to remain armed. From this extract from his memoirs, Walter White, the future head of the NAACP, recalled how, at age 13, himself and his father defended their home from white rioters. With this, we bring to you Walter Francis White, who many have described as the foremost spokesman for African Americans for almost a quarter of a century, and one-time executive secretary of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. Before we go further, kindly support our work by hitting the thumb button, share with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and subscribe to stay with us for more interesting and revealing videos. Guess you were wondering who Walter White was, or was he actually a black man? Born Walter Francis White on July 1st, 1893, in Atlanta, Georgia, U.S., Walter was the son of George and Madeline White. By the time he was born, his father had attended Atlanta University, which is still known today as one of the South's historically black colleges, and became a postal worker, an admired position in the federal government. His mother had graduated from the same institution and became a teacher. Walter attended the Atlanta public schools, finished the Atlanta University High School and the Atlanta University College there in the class of 1916. This period of study enabled White to spend 8 years in the old Atlanta's unusual atmosphere at its zenith. There, he was exposed to instruction which had been enriched by a decade of W.E.B. Du Bois research. Undoubtedly, White's life work reflected on the old Atlanta University's pioneer and still unequaled contributions in Southern-colored institutions of higher learning. Of mixed race with African and European ancestry on both sides, White had features showing the latter. He emphasized in his autobiography, A Man Called White,
I am a Negro. My skin is white, my eyes are blue, my hair is blonde. The traits of my race are nowhere visible upon me.
Of his 32 great-great-great-grandparents, only 5 were black, and the other 27 were white. All members of his immediate family had fair skin, and his mother, Madeline, was also blue-eyed and blonde. The oral history of his mother's family asserts that her maternal grandparents were Dilcia, an enslaved woman concubine, and her owner, William Henry Harrison. Harrison had 6 children with Dilcia, and much later was elected President of the United States in 1840, but served for only 31 days. Madeline's mother, Marie Harrison, was one of Dilcia's daughters with Harrison. Held in enslavement in LaGrange, Georgia, where she had been sold, Marie became a concubine to Augustus Ware. The wealthy white man bought her a house, had 4 children with her, and passed on some wealth to them. White and his family identified as Negro and lived among Atlanta's Negro community, despite White and his siblings inheriting a bit less than 16% African ancestry and being able to pass as white. George and Madeline White took a kind but firm approach in rearing their children, encouraging hard work and regular schedules. In his autobiography, White relates that his parents ran a strict schedule on Sundays. They locked him in his room for silent prayer, a time so boring that he almost begged to do homework. His father forbade Walter from reading any books less than 25 years old, so he chose to read Dickens, Thackeray, and Trollope by the time he was 12. Having experienced in close quarters segregation events and their effects such as the drinking from the water fountain that we mentioned earlier, and the race riots from 1898 to 1906, these influenced White's self-identity as he began to develop skills to pass for a white, which he used later to preserve his safety as a civil rights activist in the South. For Walter White, growing up black and being able to pass as white empowered him to take on 2 identities that aided his work with the NAACP, exposing racial injustices in the United States. He was quick to accept the fact that he descended from enslaved black people and white plantation owners, and the era he grew up in, which the one-drop rule was enforced, a law that categorized anyone with 1 drop of black blood in the family line as a black person, regardless of having a far greater percentage of European ancestry. Despite his European lineage, the future civil rights activist grew up as an African-American man. White came to understand that despite his pale skin, he was, and we quote, a Negro, a human being with an invisible pigmentation, which marked me a person to be hunted, hanged, abused, discriminated against, kept in poverty and ignorance in order that those whose skin was white would have readily at hand a proof of their superiority, as he wrote in his 1948 autobiography. His identity as a black man was never more clear than on September 22, 1906, the first day of the Atlanta Race Massacre. The carnage unfolded when a white mob, increasingly fearful that upwardly mobile black residents were threatening the social order of Jim Crow, killed dozens of African Americans over unsubstantiated allegations of assaults on white women by black men. White, in his memoir, recalled when his father heard that a white mob was headed to the home where that Negro mail carrier lives to burn it down. Relating the traumatic event, White wrote in the said memoir, during the afternoon preceding the riot, little bands of sullen, evil-looking men talked excitedly on street corners all over downtown Atlanta. Around 7 o'clock, my father and I were driving toward a mailbox at the corner of Peachtree and Houston Streets, when there came from nearby Pryor Street a roar, the likes of which I'd never heard before, but which sent a sensation of mingled fear and excitement coursing through my body. I asked permission of Father to go, and see what the trouble was. He bluntly ordered me to stay in the cart. A little later, we drove down Atlanta's main business thoroughfare, Peachtree Street. Again, we heard the terrifying cries, this time near at hand and coming toward us. We saw a lame Negro bootblack from Herndon's barbershop pathetically trying to outrun a mob of whites. Less than 100 yards from us, the chase ended. We saw clubs and fists descending to the accompaniment of savage shouting and cursing. Suddenly, a voice cried, "There goes another." Its work done, the mob went after new prey. The body with the withered foot lay dead in a pool of blood on the street. Father's apprehension and mine steadily increased during the evening, although the fact that our skins were white kept us from attack. Another circumstance favored us. The mob had not yet grown violent enough to attack United States government property. But I could see Father's relief when he punched the time clock at 11 p.m. and got into the cart to go home. He wanted to go the back way down Forsyth Street, but I begged him, in my childish excitement and ignorance, to drive down Marietta to 5 Points, the heart of Atlanta's business district, where the crowds were densest and the yells loudest. No sooner had we turned into Marietta Street, however, than we saw careening toward us an Undertaker's barouche. Crouched in the rear of the vehicle were 3 Negroes clinging to the sides of the carriage as it lunged and swerved. On the driver's seat crouched a white man, the reins held taut in his left hand. A huge whip was gripped in his right. Alternately, he lashed the horses and, without looking backward, swung the whip in savage swoops in the faces of members of the mob as they lunged at the carriage determined to seize the 3 Negroes. There was no time for us to get out of its path, so sudden and swift was the appearance of the vehicle. The hubcap of the right rear wheel of the barouche hit the right side of our much lighter wagon. Father and I instinctively threw our weight and kept the cart from turning completely over. Our mare was a Texas Mustang, which, frightened by the sudden blow, lunged in the air as Father clung to the reins. Good fortune was with us. The cart settled back on its 4 wheels as Father said in a voice which brooked no dissent, "We are going home the back way and not down Marietta." But again on Pryor Street we heard the cry of the mob. Close to us and in our direction ran a stout and elderly woman who cooked at a downtown white hotel. 50 yards behind, a mob which filled the street from curb to curb was closing in. Father handed the reins to me and, though he was of slight stature, reached down and lifted the woman into the cart. I did not need to be told to lash the mare to the fastest speed she could muster. The church bells tolled the next morning for Sunday service, but no one in Atlanta believed for a moment that the hatred and lust for blood had been appeased. Like skulls on a cannibal's hut, the hats and caps of victims of the mob of the night before had been hung on the iron hooks of telegraph poles. None could tell whether each hat represented a dead Negro, but we knew that some of those who had worn the hats would never again wear any. Late in the afternoon, friends of my father's came to warn of more trouble that night. They told us that plans had been perfected for a mob to form on Peachtree Street just after nightfall to march down Houston Street to what the white people called Darktown, 3 blocks or so below our house, to clean out the... There had never been a firearm in our house before that day. Father was reluctant even in those circumstances to violate the law, but he at last gave in at Mother's insistence. We turned out the lights early, as did all our neighbors. No one removed his clothes or thought of sleep. Apprehension was tangible. We could almost touch its cold and clammy surface. Toward midnight, the unnatural quiet was broken by a roar that grew steadily in volume. Even today, I grow tense in remembering it. Father told Mother to take my sisters, the youngest of them only 6, to the rear of the house, which offered more protection from stones and bullets. My brother George was away, so Father and I, the only males in the house, took our places at the front windows of the parlor. The windows opened on a porch along the front side of the house, which in turn gave onto a narrow lawn that sloped down to the street and a picket fence. There was a crash as Negroes smashed the street lamp at the corner of Houston and Piedmont Avenue down the street. In a very few minutes, the vanguard of the mob, some of them bearing torches, appeared. A voice which we recognized as that of the son of the grocer with whom we had traded for many years yelled, "That's where that mail carrier lives. Let's burn it down. It's too nice for a to live in." In the eerie light, Father turned his drawn face toward me. In a voice as quiet as though he were asking me to pass him the sugar at the breakfast table, he said, "Son, don't shoot until the first man puts his foot on the lawn, and then, don't you miss." The mob moved toward the lawn. I tried to aim my gun, wondering what it would feel like to kill a man. Suddenly, there was a volley of shots. The mob hesitated, stopped. Some friends of my father's had barricaded themselves in a 2-story brick building just below our house. It was they who had fired. Some of the mobsmen, still bloodthirsty, shouted, "Let's go get the." Others, afraid now for their safety, held back. Our friends, noting the hesitation, fired another volley. The mob broke and retreated up Houston Street. In the quiet that followed, I put my gun aside and tried to relax, but a tension different from anything I had ever known possessed me. I was gripped by the knowledge of my identity, and in the depths of my soul, I was vaguely aware that I was glad of it. I was sick with loathing for the hatred which had flared before me that night and come so close to making me a killer. But I was glad I was not one of those who hated. I was glad I was not one of those made sick and murderous by pride. It was this horrific experience that many believed must have been a deciding factor for Walter White, one of such people being Jelani Cobb. Cobb, a New Yorker staff writer and Columbia Journalism School professor, said White's identity was shaped by a long tradition of voluntary Negroes, a term coined by Black history scholar David Levering Lewis. White was shaped by his background in Atlanta, his Black neighborhood, and Black church, says Cobb. His family also made the political choice that they would never hide or shirk their identity or treat it as shameful. Some of the more impactful work of White centered around his appearance. Walter Francis White passed as a white man investigating crimes for the National Association of Colored People, NAACP. He was able to work in hostile environments and gain communication with whites in cases involving the civil rights of blacks. White became involved with Klan groups and exposed information involving lynchings. In Little Rock, Arkansas, he escaped on a train, having his identity discovered. As he was leaving, the train conductor informed White that he was missing the fun, as they had identified a yellow and they were going to lynch him. Remember, White had no appearance of being black. As we have seen in the case of Homer Plessy, there are blacks who have the appearance of being white. It is significant with the advances in DNA testing that an estimated over 3.5% of all whites in this country have at least 1% of direct black blood. Many people are completely unaware of this heritage, but in a country that places so much emphasis on being white, it is no wonder that more people have not simply moved to an area where they are unknown and assume the identity of a white person. After graduating from Atlanta University in 1916, White briefly worked as an insurance agent and lobbied to save a black public high school and establish a local NAACP chapter when his work caught the attention of NAACP founder W.E.B. Du Bois and Executive Secretary James Weldon Johnson. He was soon offered a position in 1918 as Assistant Secretary at the NAACP's headquarters in New York. White's first major racial justice campaign effort in the national NAACP office came when he persuaded the association to oppose the Atlanta Board of Education's decision to eliminate 7th grade for African American students as part of an effort to finance a new high school for white students. Between 1918 and 1931, White built a national reputation both within and beyond NAACP circles. The United States was in the middle of a lynching scourge when White arrived in New York in 1918. The NAACP had tallied 3,224 lynchings between 1889 to 1918, mostly targeting African Americans. In 1918, when he joined the NAACP staff, 67 persons, all but 4 of them blacks, were lynched. In the year of his death, 1955, there were only 3 recorded lynchings, and none had occurred in the 5 previous years. Lynchings had become a rarity and were soon to disappear from the American scene. White hardly had 2 weeks to settle at his new job before he left for Tennessee to investigate a lynching. From there, White, as he writes, started a phase of work for the association which neither it nor I had contemplated when I was employed. White's principal objective became the abolition of lynching. Aided by his fair skin, he made on-the-spot investigations of lynchings and race riots and conducted a vigorous, sustained drive for enactment of a federal anti-lynching law. Although no such law was enacted, the climate of public opinion was markedly changed by his investigations and exposés. Investigating riots was a dangerous mission. To go undetected, White often pretended to be a white salesman or a white journalist, depending on the circumstance. For one of his first operations, investigating the hangings of 10 men, as well as the brutal lynching of a pregnant black woman, White casually engaged a local merchant whom he suspected had participated in the murder. As his manner became more and more friendly, I ventured to mention guardedly the recent lynchings. Instantly, he became cautious until I hinted that I had great admiration for the manly spirit the men of the town had exhibited, White recalled in a 1929 article for American Mercury. Once the merchant felt he was in safe company, he freely shared his racist beliefs and enjoyment of the woman's lynching, White added. During the Red Summer of 1919, White posed as a white journalist from Chicago while investigating a race massacre in Arkansas when he received a warning from a fellow black man who knew his true identity. Word had gotten out, he was told, and a white mob was after him. White caught the next train out of town. The NAACP office staff, who had heard White had been lynched, sighed with relief when they saw him return. In 1931, White took over as NAACP executive secretary, urging President Franklin D. Roosevelt and later President Harry Truman to make statements against lynching and segregation. Most notably, White unleashed an ambitious agenda during his tenure that focused on turning the tide for Black Americans through Congress and courtrooms. He hired a young Thurgood Marshall to defend wrongfully accused Black people against charges of inciting race riots, empowering Marshall to start the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, filing lawsuits to desegregate government offices, the military, and public schools, eventually leading to the groundbreaking case Brown v. Board of Education. White was also involved in an early assault on discrimination and voting rights. White in 1930 almost single-handedly succeeded in influencing the U.S. Senate to reject by a 41-39 vote President Herbert Hoover's nomination of Judge John J. Parker of North Carolina for appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court. Parker was on record as being opposed to black suffrage. At the outbreak of World War II, White assisted labor leader A. Philip Randolph in pressing for a U.S. Fair Employment Practices Committee, June 1941, that would act to ban discrimination in government and wartime industry. Black people were then largely disfranchised in southern states, which were politically controlled by white Democrats. At the turn of the 20th century, the state legislatures had passed discriminatory laws and constitutions that effectively created barriers to voter registration and closed Black people out of the political process. White sponsored other civil rights legislation, which was also defeated by the Southern Bloc: the Castigan-Wagner Bill of 1935, the Gavagan Bill of 1937, and the Van Nuys Bill of 1940. Southerners had to mount a major political and financial effort to take the Castigan-Wagner Bill out of consideration and to defeat the Gavagan Bill. Segregationist Senator James F. Burns of South Carolina said in session about the Dyer Bill, "One Negro has ordered this bill to pass. If Walter White should consent to have this bill laid aside, its advocates would desert it as quickly as football players unscramble when the whistle of the referee is heard." White's word was the only thing that kept the bill before Congress. Although the bill did not pass the Senate, White and the NAACP secured widespread public support for the cause. By 1938, a Gallup poll found that 72% of Americans and 57% of Southerners favored an anti-lynching bill. White also contributed to creating alliances among civil rights activists, many of whom went on to lead in the movement from the 1950s. White's activities transcended NAACP, civil rights activism, and legislation influencing. He also used literary methods, especially to win over good-spirited individuals across all divides. Through his cultural interests and his close friendships with white literary power brokers Carl Van Vechten and Alfred A. Knopf, Sr., White was one of the founders of the New Negro cultural flowering. Popularly known as the Harlem Renaissance, the period was one of intense literary and artistic production. Harlem became the center of Black American intellectual and artistic life. It attracted creative people from across the nation, as did New York City in general. In addition to his work with the NAACP, White was the author of critically acclaimed novels, The Fire in the Flint, 1924, about a doctor who returns to the South only to end up being lynched, and Flight, 1926, whose protagonist initially passes for white, then re-embraces her racial identity. His 1929 nonfiction work, Rope and a biography of Judge Lynch, examined the causes and effects of lynching. Additional books were A Rising Wind, 1945, which inspired Neville Shute to write the popular novel The Checkerboard 2 years later. His autobiography, A Man Called White, 1948, and How Far the Promised Land, 1955. Unfinished at his death was Blackjack, a novel on Harlem life and the career of an African-American boxer. White also helped encourage Harlem Renaissance writers. By the way, a quick digression, and in case you are wondering on the relationship of Judge Lynch and the origin of the word lynch, both of which coincidentally shared same timeline with the slavery and segregation eras. Lynching is a form of violence in which a mob, under the pretext of administering justice without trial, executes a presumed offender, often after inflicting torture and corporal mutilation. The term lynch law refers to a self-constituted court that imposes sentence on a person without due process of law. Both terms are derived from the name of Charles Lynch, 1736 to 1796, a Virginia planter and justice of the peace who, during the American Revolution, headed an irregular court formed to punish loyalists. In 1955, White died at age 61 from a heart attack, leaving behind a complicated legacy. He may have achieved advances in racial justice, but his ability to straddle both racial lines at his convenience remained controversial among some African Americans. Soon after White died, a new generation of African American leaders emerged, and for these leaders, his pale complexion was an inconvenience, wrote A.J. Bamey in White Lies, The Double Life of Walter F. White and America's Darkest Secret. But the impact of White's civil rights work was reflected in the many tributes he received upon his death. As New York's African American newspaper, the Amsterdam News, wrote, White's cocky aggressiveness stayed with him as long as he lived, as did his boyhood vanity. But it was these very qualities that helped to make him the best lobbyist our race has ever produced, and one of the very best of any race. Walter White received awards both when alive and posthumously. Among his awards are 1927. White received the Harmon Award, William E. Harmon Foundation Award for Distinguished Achievement Among Negroes, for his book Rope and An Interview with Judge Lynch, A Study of Lynching. 1937. White was awarded the Spingarn Medal by the NAACP for outstanding achievement by an African American. 2002. Molefi Kete Asante listed Walter Francis White on his list of 100 greatest African Americans. And in 2009, White was inducted into the Georgia Writers Hall of Fame. That brings us to the end of yet another interesting video segment. Support our works by hitting that thumb button in front of you, share with your acquaintances to keep spreading consciousness, and subscribe.
All right. All praises to the Most High for another great video from our good brothers over at Black Journals. Shout out to those brothers, man. The great work that they do. And we certainly appreciate them. Indeed. So all praises to the Abba. Man, this is an interesting story, you know, to hear and to deal with. Because I think I've heard some about Walter White, but never this much detail. And you know, it's dynamic to think about how much information was shared here, and how his parents were, how his father was ready. You know, one thing I want to point out, it was ironic that his mother was the advocate for them to get some weapons in the house. And, you know, the father was like, no, we're not going to do it. And the mother was like, look here, you need to get you some weapons up in here. And so finally he moved to it. But, you know, I wonder what is that will make a man say like, nah, you know, something like that. You know, that's your job. That's the man's job to protect the family. You know, so I really wonder why he wasn't swift to move to that. Because I'm going to tell you something. When it comes to protecting family, when it comes to protecting my family, you ain't got to ask. I don't need no encouragement. That's what I'm there for. That's my position. You know what I'm saying? So if it go down, it go down. Hey, I make no qualms, no apologies, nothing. If I'm protecting my family, hey, that's it. You lose. You know, my job is to make you lose in that situation. Yeah. So I'll leave that there. But yeah, interesting story that you know, very interesting. Lots of like I said, I think I've heard of this gentleman before, but not in such detail. I wonder what his DNA, his genetic makeup is, and what his father comes to be. Because I think often about Pat Mahomes, the quarterback for Kansas City, and the reason I think often about him is because his father had him with a white woman, and he looks Caucasian. I mean, he doesn't look Caucasian; he looks mixed. But his children, he went to a white woman and had children, and so his children look Caucasian, and that's difficult because, man, what does that mean for his children? I mean, his children, their mother is white. That means that most likely his children are going to choose white women, and so his children who look white but actually are Israelites, that they're going to continue to mix out, until Mashiach comes. I don't foresee that those little boys saying, I want a black woman. I don't foresee that. They growing up with a white woman, and then they got their father who looks different, and then they got their grandfather who they probably hardly see or won't see much because he's older. But I wonder if that was his plan to mix himself out. Like, I want to have a son that I won't see myself in, and then by the time I have grandchildren, I won't be present there at all.
That's terrible.
Like, was that his plan? I mean, I wondered if that was his plan. It is terrible, for real. But why would you go the way you went unless that's your plan? I want to see myself and my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren, most are willing. But for somebody who I don't like the way I look, I don't like my hair texture, I don't like whatever. They might be like, yeah, I'm gonna get rid of me and just have this go forward. So, but I wonder what his father looked like, and I mean, if he passed for a Caucasian, surely his father would pass for Caucasian as well. So,
I'm actually. The story is very interesting, and it kind of prompted me to kind of start looking into him a bit more. So he's of mixed race, is what it's saying, with both African and European ancestry on both sides. So you are accurate in assessing that his father probably looked much like him. Mm-hmm. So out of his 32 great grandparents, only 5 of them were black, and the other 27 were white.
Wow.
All members of his immediate family had fair skin, and his mother, Madeline, was also blue-eyed and blonde. Wow. So, yeah, he's on record as saying about his skin. What was I just read? I just read it. Okay, he says, my skin is white, my eyes are blue, my hair is blonde. The traits of my race are nowhere visible upon me. But in fact, they probably are. But all of that aside, he and his family chose to live as Negro, and we look at the contributions that he put towards the struggle, and we could never minimize those. And he was at liberty, well, not at liberty, but able to get indoors that you or I wouldn't be able to get into for our people,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they talked about him going like basically undercover, and but they'd always seen him sniff him out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's crazy. I mean, if you got blonde hair and blue eyes, I don't know how they sniff him out. Like, that's crazy, but it is what it is. But interesting story. Interesting. You got anything else? We're gonna go ahead to the next video.
No, that's it.
All praises. Well, we're gonna jump to this next video here, and praises to the Abba. We learning. That's the point of these video reviews, is to get us in the position where we can learn something additional and be edified in all that we are. So, Let's continue to the next video. How many times whites lied to get blacks killed? How many times? Innumerable. It's an innumerable amount of times. So let's get with it.
Sadly, for centuries, false accusations and deliberate misinformation have been used as tools of oppression, fueling racial tensions and leading to devastating consequences for Black communities. From the Reconstruction era to the period of the Civil Rights Movement and beyond, lies and distortions have been exploited to justify violence, discrimination, and systemic injustice. This compilation examines 10 pivotal cases where white lies have led to destructive outcomes, shedding light on the enduring impact of these events and honoring the memories of victims. By confronting this painful history, we can work towards a future built on truth, accountability, and racial equality. But before we delve in, consider subscribing to our channel. If you're yet to, like, comment, and spread our eye-opening Black narratives. Together, let's educate, inspire, and empower each other to build a more just and equitable society. Going forward, now let us explore some gruesome and heart-wrenching examples where racial falsehoods led to the destruction of Black lives, families, and in some cases, an entire Black community. 1. The brutal murder of Mary Turner, her husband, and their unborn child. On May 16, 1918, a tragic event unfolded in Brooks County, Georgia. Hampton Smith, a notorious white farmer, was killed. Smith was well known for exploiting Black farm workers, bailing them out of jail for petty crimes, and forcing them to work off debts on his farm. The death of Hampton Smith led to a series of investigations, as it was evident in his body that he died as a result of a fatal shooting. As the community grappled with grief, investigations commenced, leading to the arrest of several Black men, including Hayes Turner. During the interrogations, a white mob influenced the narrative, falsely accusing Hayes Turner of, and the other Blacks. The mob had cited a past land dispute between Turner and Smith some days back, although it was resolved peacefully. This unfounded claim sparked racial tensions and sealed Turner's fate. They claimed Turner was the mastermind of the murder, while the other Blacks conspired with him. Turner, alongside several others, were found guilty, despite the issue lacking concrete evidence. The mob's rage.
You know, I definitely have always enjoyed the content that our brothers over there bring forth out of Black journals. I think every now and then I hear different things, hear them say different things, and I think it's an honest mistake. But you know, the brother just said, or the narrator just said, that this event sparked racial tension, which is inaccurate. Racial tension has predated, you know, this situation. So there's always been racial tension.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I get what he's trying to say, that this took it to another level. Yeah, because there's always been, like you said, there's always been racial tension. You know, ever since we got on them ships and, you know, they was trucking us over, you know, the water, there was racial tension. So, you know, yeah, I get what he's saying. But yeah, but that's accurate, though, indeed. Good point.
Age and racial bias sealed his fate. And on May 18, 1918, Hayes Turner and several others were lynched by a white mob. His body was found hanging from a tree, brutally beaten and shot. Grieving and outraged, Mary Turner publicly denounced her husband's lynching and vowed to seek justice. The white mob, fearing she would expose their crimes, targeted her next. On May 19, 1918, a white mob from Brooks County, Georgia, would lynch Mary Turner, who was 8 months pregnant then, at Folsom's Bridge, 16 miles north of Valdosta, for speaking publicly against the lynching of her husband the day before. The mob would bind her feet, hang her from a tree with her head facing down, throw gasoline on her, and burn the clothes off her body. Mrs. Turner was still alive when the mob took a large butcher's knife to her abdomen, cutting the unborn baby from her body. When the baby fell off Mary Turner's womb, a member of the mob would crush the crying baby's head with his foot. The mob then riddled Mrs. Turner's body with hundreds of bullets, killing her finally. Looking at the processes towards the death of one person, a pregnant woman for that matter, one can't help but wonder what kind of monsters these were. What kind of hellish hate could have propelled them towards such untellable cruelty? After the brutal killings, Sidney Johnson, a black man, would confess to killing Hampton Smith. Johnson, who had been working to pay off a fine for rolling dice, a minor offense, had gotten into a quarrel with Smith and fatally shot him. Now to the next. 2. The gruesome murder of Emmett Till.
All right, before we jump to Emmett Till, my gracious, what a horrendous act of
violence.
Oh my gracious! I mean,
And that's an understatement. Yeah.
Oh my gracious! And stomp on the head of the child. Like how? Honestly, and this is not me being funny. This is me being serious. How do we deal with a monster of this magnitude? Like, seriously, think about this. How do you deal with a monster who will stomp on the head of a crying baby? I mean,
there's no reasoning with I can't even call this person. Well, there's no reasoning with this individual.
It's a monster. Yeah, this is not somebody you can reason with. This is not somebody you can have a conversation with. This is a monster. They cut this woman's pregnant belly. The baby comes out and cries, and somebody stomps on the head of the child. Nobody sees. We read the scripture where Moshe was sent down the river, and the woman, the daughter of Pharaoh sees it and says, "Oh, she had compassion for the child. She had compassion for the child. Oh, this is one of Hebrews' children." This is not that. This is something completely and utterly different. Like,
man, all praises. When we get off of not all praises about this situation, but just that we actually came across this, because and remind me when we get off, and I'll tell you what I mean. I don't want to say it over the line, because it might not be accurate.
I got you. All right. Well, let's continue here. Just think about that. What kind of person? Well, how do you deal with a person like this who will stomp on the head of a child who was cut out of the belly of a woman? Let's think about that. Let's continue.
Young Emmett Till, a 14-year-old African-American, traveled from Chicago to Money, Mississippi in August 1955. His destination was the humble home of his great-uncle and great-aunt, Mose and Elizabeth Wright. During a normal hangout on August 24th, 1955, Emmett Till, while standing with his cousins and some friends outside a country store in Money, bragged that his girlfriend back home was white. Emmett's African-American companions, disbelieving him, dared Emmett to ask the white woman sitting behind the store counter for a date. He went in, bought some candy, and on his way out was heard saying, "Bye, baby." There were no witnesses in the store, but Carolyn Bryan, the white woman behind the counter, later claimed that the young lad had grabbed her, made lewd advances, and wolf whistled at her as he sauntered out. 4 days later, Roy Bryant returned from a business trip, and on hearing how Emmett had allegedly spoken to his wife, he and his half-brother J.W. Milam went to the home of Till's great-uncle, Mose Wright, in the early morning hours of August 28, 1955. The pair demanded to see the boy. Despite pleas from Wright, they forced Emmett into their car, and after driving around in the night, they had the little boy beaten mercilessly and shot to death. As if this wasn't enough, they dumped his body in the Tallahatchie River. 3 days later, his corpse was discovered, but was so disfigured that Mose Wright could only identify it by a ring that Emmett Till normally wore. The white authorities wanted to bury the body quickly in order to conceal the inhumane act, but Till's mother, Mamie Bradley, requested the body be sent back to Chicago in order to seek justice for her son's death. Tragically, the damage has been done. No amount of violence or justice could bring back the youngster's life. His life, filled with promise and potential, was brutally cut short by a blatant lie. His aspirations and dreams for the future were shattered, leaving a lasting impact on his family and community. 3. The Wilmington Insurrection of 1898. In the late 19th century, Wilmington, North Carolina, was a thriving city with a significant African-American population. Despite facing racial tensions, Black residents had made notable economic and political progress. However, this advancement was perceived as a threat by some white supremacists, and just one fabrication lit the fuse, and the delicate balance of power was disrupted. In 1989, a sensationalized article titled "A Declaration of Independence" appeared in the Wilmington Daily Record, a Black-owned newspaper. The piece, written by Alex Manley, a Black editor, addressed issues like racial equality and lynching. White supremacists distorted its message, claiming Manley advocated for interracial relationships. This fabricated narrative spread like wildfire, fueling racial animosity. White Democrats, seeking to regain control, exploited these tensions. They launched a campaign of misinformation, falsely accusing Black Republicans of planning an armed uprising. On Election Day, November 8, 1989, white supremacists intimidated Black voters, preventing many from casting ballots. The following day, a group of armed white men, including members of the Red Shirts, a paramilitary organization, marched through Wilmington's Black neighborhoods. This march led to an eruption of intense violence. The mob attacked Black residents, businesses, and homes. The insurrection resulted in the deaths of at least 60 African Americans, with many more injured or displaced. The violence was not spontaneous, it was orchestrated. White leaders had planned the coup, using deception and racial fears to justify their actions. The lies told about Alex Manley's article and the alleged Black uprising served as a pretext for the insurrection. In the aftermath, the city's Black leaders were forced to flee or face imprisonment. The Wilmington insurrection led to the overthrow of the elected fusion government, composed of Black Republicans and white populists. This incident made white Democrats seize power, establishing a segregationist regime that endured for decades. The tragic events of Wilmington underscore the lethal consequences of racial fabrications, where one egregious lie led to the senseless slaughter of innocent lives. 4.
All right. So here's another situation where, we see this voting as an imperative part of, we had ancestors who did great sacrifice so that we could vote in this country. And a lot of Israelites, a lot of us don't vote. I don't vote. And the reason I don't vote is because Torah teaches us not to set someone of another nation as king over you. So if I vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, I'm setting someone of another nation over me.
Mm-hmm.
If I voted for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, I'm setting someone of another nation over me. I did vote for Barack Obama. That was before I was in the truth, of course. And I believe that Obama was one of our own people. I believe that maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm incorrect, based on his heritage. I don't know. His father from was it Nigeria?
No, his father's actually from Kenya.
Kenya.
And I want to say, and I don't know this for certain myself, but I want to say that brothers say that his father was Hamitic, from Ham. But these brothers believe that everybody from Africa they believe everybody in Africa for the most part now is from Ham. But
Right.
So you're right. We don't know.
Yeah.
Really, we'd have to look at that.
Yeah, we have to dig deeper into that one. But that was before the truth. So now I'm in the truth. Would I vote for it? No, I'm not voting for any of these people because this is me now. This is me. I'm not voting for any of these people because I don't believe voting for Donald Trump or for Kamala Harris would make a difference. I think that the wicked is going to win, and that it's already decided who's going to win before the election even take place. So it'll be what it is. You know what I'm saying? I don't trust these people to be truthful in what they produce as far as a viable person in that position. So, what you think? What's your thoughts on that?
What was the question?
About the voting? Like the last one talked about our people voting and
Okay, so like you, before coming into this walk, I I voted the last 3 elections. Actually, no, I only voted. I didn't vote the first time Obama ran, and I voted the next time he ran, and then I voted the next time after that. But then I came into the walk, shortly after Trump came into office. So
yeah,
I didn't vote, the last time. And you're right. I unless I see someone of our people, I don't intend on
yes.
going forth. Uh,
All praises. I appreciate that. I really do. I do because yeah, some of my people have different views on that, and I get it. Our people did sacrifice greatly to have but I think it's an illusion. I don't think it's
mhm.
real. I don't think that it's really that you can count to cast a ballot in the land of your captivity would indicate that you're putting your trust into these people to give you what it is that you wanted to have, and that to me that's folly. Even if an Obama-like person ran now, even if it was a so-called black man,
Hmm.
I would vote on that one. But can I trust, even if he wins, is he going to be the best thing for us?
Right.
I mean, because Obama had 8 years, and what did we get out of that?
You're right. You're
You
right.
know, if we was
I mean,
homosexual,
again, it's naive to believe that the president is even calling the shots anyway. Uh,
yeah,
he's really just the face.
right.
There's a whole machine behind all of this, and the scriptures tell us that there's wicked rulers in high
Our
places.
places, indeed, our
Um,
key.
these are probably not even human. I would say
Yeah,
calling shots.
yeah. I mean, this is thought to be the leader of the free world, and yet this world is not free. This world is wicked. This world is completely and utterly wicked. So
Mhm.
uh, even if there was a so-called black man who would run and present himself as good on either ticket, and I'm voting for him, and then he gets in, guess what? Can I trust that he gonna do the right thing? Like I said, we had 8 years of Obama, and what did we get? We got Obamacare, yeah, and then we got uh, rights for gays. So you have to be gay to get some rights in
Mhm.
America. Did he pass anything to say if you violate black people, you're gonna be prosecuted to the full extent? No, no, not at all, not at all. So, well, let's continue. I don't want to harp too long on this, but let's continue.
The Central Park 5 case, April 19, 1989, will forever be etched in the memory of New York City. On that fateful night, Central Park, a haven of tranquility and recreation, became the scene of a heinous crime. Tricia Maley, a 28-year-old investment banker, was brutally raped and savagely beaten, leaving her clinging to life. The assault was vicious. Tricia suffered severe head injuries, a fractured skull, and was left unconscious. The attack sparked widespread outrage and horror, with the city demanding swift justice for the young professional. As news spread, fears of lawlessness and violence gripped the community. New Yorkers were stunned, questioning the safety of their city's iconic green space. But justice was compromised, racial tensions simmered, and the police were under pressure to solve the case. In the midst of chaos, a lie was born. And just because of that one lie, 5 innocent lives were forever altered. The lie began with the coerced confessions of 5 Black and Latino teenagers: Antron McCray, Kevin Richardson, Yusef Salam, Raymond Santana, and Corey Wise. Detectives leveraged fear, intimidation, and promises of leniency to extract statements from the boys. As the investigation unfolded, racial stereotypes and media frenzy fueled the narrative of wilding black youth. Headlines like Wolfpack's Prey and Central Park Horror solidified public opinion. The New York police concealed coercion tactics, claiming voluntary confessions. Prosecutors alleged conspiracy, despite lacking physical evidence. The trial was a rush to judgment, relying on questionable confessions and flawed forensic analysis. No DNA evidence linked the five to the crime scene. Yet, they were convicted and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 5 to 15 years. 13 years later, truth prevailed. Matias Reyes, a serial rapist, confessed to the crime. DNA evidence confirmed his guilt. The Central Park Five were the exonerated and their convictions vacated, but the damage was done. 5 young lives were already destroyed by racial bias, coercion, media manipulation, and unsubstantiated lies. 5. The infamous frame-up of Jessie Hunter. From the bruises on her body, it was clear Fannie Taylor had been beaten. The story she told to explain them away destroyed an all-black town in Florida and got several of its residents murdered. On New Year's Day, 1923, Taylor, then 22-year-old wife of a mill worker, said a black man had assaulted her. She didn't say rape, only that she'd been assaulted. But the word assault was interpreted as a sexual violation by the whites in her town of Sumner, Fla. Sumner was just a few miles from Rosewood, an all-black town of about 120 individuals that had seen its own version of white flight after industry left Rosewood and whites moved to Sumner. As word of Taylor's claim spread, some black people in Rosewood who worked in Sumner said the assailant had actually been Taylor's lover, and her story was a cover to spare her husband's wrath, said Maxine Jones, a Florida State University professor of African American history, who co-authored an account of the massacre for the Florida legislature in 1993. While the fear of black-on-white violence had been stoked across the South since the days of slavery, particularly in areas where blacks outnumbered whites, Taylor's claim was especially pernicious. Taylor's claim came within days of a Ku Klux Klan rally near Gainesville, just to the north of Levy County. With tensions high, her words set in motion 6 days of violence in which whites from Sumner and neighboring towns and counties descended on Rosewood, with the intent of finding the alleged assailant, Jessie Hunter, and lynching him. Women and children fled to the woods for safety and waited for days in the cold before local train conductors alerted to the violence sent a train to rescue them. Some nearby kind white families hid their black neighbors to protect them. By January 6, 1923, the town was empty, and so many black people and just 2 whites were dead, and the mob burned down the remains of the town. The black residents of Rosewood scattered, abandoning their property, never to return. No one was ever arrested in the case. Jones of FSU and 5 colleagues wrote the account of the incident in support of a lawsuit against the state of Florida by some of the survivors who had been children at the time.
Because of fear, the massacre had remained a family secret for years,
Jones said,
not knowing who you could trust and believing people with white skin could get back at you.
But one Rosewood descendant, Arnett Doctor, finally decided to speak out and seek redress based on his account and those of surviving eyewitnesses and the Jones report. The Florida legislature approved a $2.1 million settlement in 1994. The governor also issued an apology on behalf of the state for not bringing perpetrators of the destruction to justice, nor sending officials to quell the violence and rescue the innocent. A single lie, fueled by racial hate, destroyed lives. Fannie Taylor's false accusation ravaged Rosewood's black community, leaving innocent lives lost, homes and businesses in ruins, generations scarred. 6. The Gina 6. The case of the Gina 6 exposed racial injustice and inequality following an incident involving 6 male African-American teenagers. The arrest of the students, all enrolled at Gina High School in Gina, Louisiana, ignited a national movement to address long-standing injustices in what has often been referred to as the school-to-prison pipeline of policies and practices that push at-risk African-American children out of classrooms into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. The incident creating the Gina 6 took place on August 31st, 2006, the day after a school assembly where an African-American male freshman Justin Purvis, asked the school principal, Scott Wyndham, about sitting under a specific tree in the school courtyard. Purvis and other black students sat under the tree, but the following morning they found 3 nooses on the tree. The students and local black residents were alarmed at that discovery, recognizing the historical background associated with the lynching of African Americans in Louisiana and across the nation. They believed the nooses were a message from unknown white supremacists of their feelings and possible intentions toward African American students at Jena High School. What followed was a series of incidents on the school campus, including an arson that generated significant damage to the high school on November 30, 2006. No one was charged with the arson as no culprit was caught, but this event led to both white students and black students watching their backs as they didn't know who was the culprit. In the tense atmosphere of heightened racial tension, an altercation between 6 black Jena High School students and a white male student, Justin Barker, at the school on December 4, 2006. The altercation led to him being taken to the emergency room as he'd sustained severe injuries, while the other 6 black students, Robert Bailey Jr. and Carwin Jones, both 18, Theo Shaw and Bryant Purvis, both 17, Michael Bell, 16, and Jesse Raybeard, 14, were arrested and charged with attempted murder. Justin Barker, a white student, had allegedly provoked a confrontation with the 6 black students. According to eyewitnesses, he used racial slurs and taunted the group, trying to get a rise out of them. The situation escalated when Robert Bailey Jr. approached Barker, asking him to stop the verbal assault. However, instead of de-escalating, the confrontation turned physical, resulting in a brief but intense fight that left Barker with injuries, bruises, cuts, and a concussion. The 6 black students were subsequently charged with attempted second-degree murder and conspiracy. The severity of the charges sparked outrage among the black community and civil rights activists, who argued that the charges were excessive and racially motivated. As the Jena 6 case unfolded, it became painfully clear racial tensions and biases fueled the injustice here. Justin Barker's false claims and racial taunts were given credence, while the black students' accounts were disregarded and trounced. The court initially worked with Barker's narrative alone, thereby discarding the Jena 6's testimony, with their voices silenced, their truth unknown. Despite conflicting accounts, one thing was certain: the Jena 6 felt compelled to defend themselves against Barker's alleged aggression. In the end, the 6 students pleaded guilty to misdemeanor simple battery, avoiding harsher sentences. Michael Bell, initially convicted of a felony, had his conviction overturned. The 6 students were tried individually. The young men received legal assistance and support from the NAACP and the American Civil Liberties Union, especially after all white juries were selected in each case. The charges and subsequent trials of these African American students shed a spotlight on the differing treatment of students by race regarding school discipline. On September 20, 2007, nearly 20,000 protesters marched into Jena, a town of 3,000 residents, calling attention to similar incidents where white students were treated more leniently. Protesters included Reverends Jesse Jackson, Martin Luther King III, and Al Sharpton, and rappers Ice Cube, Salt and Pepper, and Mos Def. National outrage continued to mount as the cases proceeded, garnering more media attention, including from the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, BBC, MTV, and CNN. That heightened awareness played a significant role in the young men having the initial charges of attempted murder reduced, which in turn influenced their sentences. Michael Bell, 16 at the time, was tried as an adult, but his sentence was 18 months in a juvenile facility. The other 5 were charged with simple battery and entered no contest pleas, which resulted in their paying fines, court costs, restitution to Barker's family, and 7 days of probation. Members of Jena 6 have continued to share their experiences of racial injustice in the public school and justice systems. One of the 6, Theo Shaw, even decided to become an attorney because of the incident. 7.
All right, before we jump to number 7, I can recall that Jena 6 story, but I guess I had it wrong because in my mind, it was Jena 6 was about, in my mind, Jena 6 was about a white girl claiming rape, and these 6 black young men she was accusing of raping her, and apparently I had it incorrect, or the narrative of it has changed. So I don't know which one is accurate, but I remember that in 2006. It was right after. Um, it was right before Trayvon Martin. I mean, it was
Well,
right.
Trayvon Martin was 2011, I believe, or 12.
Okay. Well, I remember because this was the beginning. This was the build up to some of the issues that made me start seeing things differently.
Uh-huh.
Because
Uh-huh.
I remember Gina Six being one of those. I remember um, Trayvon Martin, and they had that guy, and they was like, okay, they're gonna get him. He gonna be guilty. He going to prison. You know, he killed that kid, and they're gonna get him. And they let him walk free. And I was like, I was appalled. I mean, I was heartbroken. You know what I'm saying? That they let this dude walk free. Like, and I remember Obama was president. He was like, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. You know, and this could have been my son. And that was so relatable to me because I didn't have children at that time. But I was thinking to myself, like, man, if that was my son, this motherfucker could be dead.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, uh, but yeah, I remember that Gina Six. I remember them talking about it, and I was like, yeah, that was in Louisiana, which is just below us. You know, I was in Arkansas. Louisiana, I've been to Louisiana before. I've been to Monroe, and that was as far as into Louisiana that I've been. But yeah, that was crazy. So I thought that it was accused of, and it may have been a different case that I'm confusing it with, but I want to say it was a case in Arkansas where this little white girl was trying to say that these black guys had raped her, and she ended up recanting her testimony because one, there was no evidence, and number two, I remember that story. Matter of fact, they probably won't bring that one up because it never saw the light of day. But I remember they had the cameras on all these boys, and the parents were down there. They were covering their children up with coats. They took their jackets off, and they were covering up their children because they would plastered these children all over the news. And it turned out that this was a false story. So that may have been what I was confusing it with. But that's what I was thinking. You remember Genesis 6 Art?
You know, as you were, speaking about that story, here's the thing. There were so many similar stories that I think that we've combined a couple of them,
Yeah.
or perhaps are missing one. But you're right. Like there were different allegations. So I think we're speaking about two different cases because maybe in the other case was how you remembered it. But
Yeah.
it's all kind of gray to me right now.
Yeah.
We over the years we've seen so many countless stories
Right.
so similar, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember Mike Bell. I remember they let all the rest of the boys go. The other five boys could go, but they kept him in prison. And they talked about how the prosecutor had the ability to decide whether to prosecute or whether to not prosecute. And like I said, he was the most powerful player in the judicial game. And so, uh, like they let them go, and like it was like a month or 6 weeks later, they finally let Mike Bell go, and we was all like, I remember I was like, man, when they gonna let Mike Bell go? They gotta let Mike Bell go. You know, they gonna uh, press this issue. Well, he held some against him because I think it was not his first concern. I want to say first offense, but it wasn't his first concern, and so they kept him in jail. But they finally let him go, and I remember I was kind of relieved that he got to go home finally. And I don't know whatever happened. I guess nothing else happened with them young boys, but these were young cats, and they would be grown now. This was 2006, so these would be adults now. But yeah, so anyway, let's continue here on this the Moore Ford lynching. And one thing I wanted to say as well, we're talking about all these different lynchings and situations and so on and so forth. And lynching is such a dirty word because they edit it as lynch. They'll bleep it out, or they're gonna bleep it out when I say it, but they'll bleep it out when other people say it. I want to see some counter lynching or some reverse lynching. You know what I'm saying? Let's get some reverse lynchings going on. You know what I'm saying? I'm laughing, but I'm not being funny.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. We read in scripture where it talks about kings and rulers being brought in chains.
Right. Exactly.
So I don't think you're that far off.
Right. I mean, it talks about also what they do. That coming back to them. Yahuwah is not mocked. What a man soweth, so shall he also reap. So when that reaping comes, we'll see. But let's continue. The Moores Floyd lynching. So let's check this out.
The Moores Ford lynching. In 1946, Walton County, Georgia, was a hub of racial tension and violence. The small town of Monroe, with a population of around 2,500 people, was entrenched in segregation and white supremacy. Blacks faced daily humiliation, economic exploitation, and terror. During that period, the local law enforcement often turned a blind eye to violence against African Americans. On July 25, 1946, a white mob lynched two black couples near Moores Ford Bridge in Walton County, Georgia, in what has been called the last mass lynching in America. The couples killed were George W. and Mae Murray Dorsey and Dorothy and Roger Malcolm. Mrs. Malcolm was 7 months pregnant. Mr. Dorsey, a World War II veteran who had served in the Pacific for 5 years, had been home for only 9 months. And on July 11, 1946, a false accusation by Barnett Hester, a white farmer, ignited a deadly chain of events. Hester claimed Roger Malcolm, a 24-year-old black veteran, stabbed him during an argument. This lie would spread like wildfire, fueling racial hatred that in no time, Roger Malcolm was arrested. 2 weeks later, J. Loy Harrison, the white landowner for whom the Malcolms and the Dorseys sharecropped, drove Mrs. Malcolm and the Dorseys to the jail to post a $600 bond. On their way back to the farm, the car was stopped by a mob of 30 armed, unmasked white men who seized Mr. Malcolm and Mr. Dorsey and tied them to a large oak tree. Mrs. Malcolm recognized one of the members of the mob, and when she called on them by name to spare her husband, the mob seized her and Mrs. Dorsey, and they were shot, beaten, and left hanging from trees. Just because of one lie, the 4 innocent lives were lost. The victims' bodies were later found riddled with bullets and bruises. Mr. Harrison watched as the white men shot all 4 people 60 times at close range, but later he claimed he could not identify any members of the mob. Local authorities and law enforcement failed to intervene, implicitly condoning the violence. The FBI investigated, but a grand jury refused to indict, perpetuating systemic racism. The case remained unsolved, and justice eluded the victims' families. The Moores Ford lynching became a symbol of racial intimidation, casting a long shadow over the civil rights movement. It underscored the deadly consequences of white lies and racial hatred. This horrific event remains a painful reminder of the need to confront systemic racism, challenge white supremacy, and promote truth and accountability. 8. The unjust murder of Ahmaud Arbery. In Satilla Shores, Georgia, a predominantly white neighborhood, racial tensions simmered beneath the surface. On February 23, 2020, a devastating event would expose the deadly consequences of white lies. Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old black man, jogged through the neighborhood, unaware of the danger lurking ahead. Travis McMichael, a 34-year-old white resident, and his father Gregory, a former police officer, claimed Arbery looked suspicious. They'd said Arbery was a burglary suspect, and both father and son armed themselves and chased him. They falsely believed he matched a description from previous break-ins. Evidence at trial revealed that on February 23, 2020, Defendants Travis and Gregory McMichael armed themselves with firearms and chased after Arbery as he jogged past their driveway. The pursuit passed by the home of defendant Roddy Bryan, who got into his own truck and joined the chase, despite the fact that he did not know and had never seen Arbery before. For the next 4 to 5 minutes, the three defendants pursued Arbery through the neighborhood, trying to box him in with their trucks. For that entire time, Arbery ran from the defendants, unarmed and with his hands in plain view. He never spoke a word to the defendants and never made any threatening sound or gesture. Rather, he repeatedly tried to run away. Ultimately, after Arbery had already changed direction multiple times, trying to escape from the defendants, Travis McMichael got out of his truck and pointed a shotgun directly at Arbery. When Arbery tried to defend himself, Travis McMichael shot him in the chest. Arbery, wounded, grabbed for the gun. During a struggle over the gun, Travis McMichael fired 2 more shots into Arbery, who then stumbled a few steps and fell face first onto the pavement, where he died in the street. Evidence at the trial revealed that the defendants had strongly held racist beliefs that led them to make assumptions and decisions about Arbery that they would not have made if Arbery were white. The McMichaels spun a web of deceit, claiming self-defense and alleging that Ahmaud had attacked Travis, but evidence contradicted their narrative. Video footage showed Ahmaud jogging peacefully, and witnesses disputed McMichael's account. 9. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. In 1932, the United States Public Health Service launched a medical experiment in Macon County, Alabama.
All right, Slacky, 1 second. I'm sorry. I keep interrupting. But I remember that story. These ones that I remember, man, that's crazy. I remember Ahmaud Arbery and being murdered by those people. And, you know, he was just doing his out exercising. So I'm thinking, you know, there's always this could be me. It's always my thought. This could be me. You know, I could be out walking, exercising, jogging, whatever, and somebody be like, yeah, that was him that was breaking into houses. And now they attacking me with ammunition and guns. And I'm just minding my own business. You know, that's crazy to think about. That could be the reality of anybody. You know, that brother is dead over that. Not because he was doing something he didn't have any business, but because somebody had some resentment towards him just because of his own existence.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. You know, I can't imagine, you know, being in my residence and looking outside and seeing somebody of another nation jogging, and now I want to take their lives just because they're in my area. Like it's not even in my makeup. But you know, this has happened countless times to my people. And it's crazy.
They thought they were gonna get away with it.
Yeah, they really did. They really did. And I wanted him to go into what happened with them, you know, what their sentence was and whatever the case. But he kind of skipped on to the next one. But man, I wanted to highlight that though, because that is as interesting as this story is. You know, all of these different stories. Some of these I remember. I mean, this was during our time. So yeah, I remember that.
That was you remember that one so freshly out because that was the hot summer of 2020. Yeah. Or you know, that was the year 2020. So, you know, we had a lot going on that year.
Yeah. COVID was coming in and you know, and then we heard about Ahmaud Avery, and I was like, Ahmaud Arbery, and I was like, he was jogging. That's all he did. Like, yeah, they chased him. They got him in a truck. They got in a truck and chased him. I was like, what? And I believe it was that time where I started being strapped when I'm, you know, leave out the house, because you never know what you're gonna face. You know, if he'd have had some protection, Who knows? He may still be alive today.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was the second month of the Gregorian calendar year of 2020.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right, let's continue here. I'm trying not to stop again, but if I see something else, I'm gonna have to stop. So let's continue.
Targeting African American sharecroppers. They deceived a total number of 600 black people that they would receive free medical care, and hundreds of black men and women participated. The study's purpose was to observe the natural progression of syphilis, a disease ravaging black communities due to poverty and lack of health care. The researchers promised participants bad blood treatment, concealing their true intent. Dr. Eugene Dibble, president of Tuskegee Institute, and Dr. John Charles Cutler, a PHS officer, led the study. They exploited vulnerable black men, withholding treatment and information. The recruitment tactics included free medical exams, meals, and burial insurance. Just because of one lie, that they were being treated, the black men and women remained in the study, unaware of their diagnosis or the deadly consequences. As the study progressed, participants suffered severe symptoms: blindness, paralysis, and dementia. Researchers documented and photographed progress without intervention. Wives and children were infected, and births resulted in congenital syphilis. Despite the availability of penicillin as a standard syphilis treatment in 1947 and the establishment of National Institutes of Health Ethics Guidelines in 1966, the study continued for 40 years. In 1972, whistleblower Peter Buxton exposed the study, sparking outrage. Congressional hearings and lawsuits followed, revealing the devastating truth. The Tuskegee syphilis study killed an estimated number of 128 blacks and infected hundreds more. This deliberate act exemplifies the rate of systemic racism in the U.S. and how desperate whites are to eliminate blacks. They had to tell such a fatal lie to lure many to their graves. 10. Dick Rowland and Sarah Page's case. In the early 20th century, Tulsa, Oklahoma, was a booming oil town with a thriving African-American community known as Greenwood. This neighborhood was a symbol of black prosperity, with successful businesses, schools, and homes. But on May 30th, 1921, a very tragic incident befell the Greenwood neighborhood. Just because of one lie, the thriving black community was brought to its knees. On May 30, 1921, a fabricated story sparked a chain reaction of violence. Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old black shoe shiner, was falsely accused of assaulting Sarah Page, a 17-year-old white elevator operator in the Drexel building. This single lie ignited long-simmering prejudices, and soon, a mob of angry whites gathered outside the courthouse, demanding Rowland's lynching. Fearing for his safety, black veterans, including World War I heroes, rallied to protect him. But their efforts were met with resistance from the white mob, and clashes ensued. As the violence escalated, law enforcement failed to intervene, effectively condoning the carnage. The National Guard was eventually called in, but their presence only worsened the situation. Over 2 days, white rioters looted and burned black-owned businesses, homes, and churches in the Greenwood district, known as Black Wall Street. Just because of one lie, an estimated number of 300 black lives were lost, with hundreds more injured. Thousands were left without shelter or livelihoods. The once thriving community was reduced to ashes. The incident between Dick Rowland and Sarah Page was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of racial violence and false accusations that plagued the U.S. during the early 20th century. The legacy of deceit and racial violence uncovered in these 10 pivotal cases underscores the devastating consequences of white lies. For centuries, false accusations and deliberate misinformation have been wielded as tools of oppression, perpetuating systemic injustice and destroying countless black lives. As we reflect on these tragic events, we honor the memories of the victims and their families. We acknowledge the resilience and courage of those who have fought against racial terror and continue to seek justice. Together, let's strive for a world where truth triumphs over deceit, justice overpowers injustice, and humanity prevails over hatred. That brings us to the...
All right, all praises, man, to the Most High Power for another, man, mind-altering video, you know. And again, shout out to the brothers for the great work that they do and sharing this information going forward. You know, man, there's so much to be talked about here. You know, I tried to interject on each story a little bit as it resonated with me. You know, Emmett Till's situation, you know, that lady at the end said that she lied, you know, at her last. She lied and he didn't do anything to her.
Right.
And yet he was brutally murdered. He was brutally murdered because of her lie. And you know, this is the history of my people in this country, and it's horrendous. It's horrendous to say the least. And you know, people don't understand why you may feel one way or another. You know, why would you not? Why would I not? Why would I not feel anger, resentment, um, you know, um, terrorism? All of these are the realities that I deal with, that I've lived with. You know, 45 years now I've been on this earth. And all 45 years I spent pretty much in this country, you know, dealing with these issues. And though has been alluded to me that I'm somehow at home, at rest, at peace, but the reality is that I have no peace, I have no rest, and this is not my home. So, you know, all this is given to me in a lie, and this is the reality that I've dealt with. You know, a lot of those stories I could directly deal with because I remember the Gina Six. I remember uh, the brother Aubrey. I remember uh, various other. I talked about Trayvon Martin. You know, remember his story. I remember the story of the young brother at the gas station playing music, and the white man deciding I'm gonna shoot up this vehicle because they music too loud. And he left there and went and ate food and went home. Went to a hotel or something like that. I can't remember what the details are, but it was you shot up a vehicle and then left and continued on like it was nothing. Like that's crazy. You've altered people's lives. Now people have to bury a loved one, and to you it's nothing. And then he didn't want to be responsible for anything. You know, oh, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened. He should have turned his music down. Since when is music a reason to shoot somebody? I mean, how is that a correlation? I don't see any correlation there. If I got a problem with your music, let me call the police. Let the police deal with it. But instead of doing that, no, I got a gun. Let me just take my gun and fire bullets into this vehicle, and that'll teach them to turn the music down. Like if I did that, I would be executed in public. Well, maybe not in public, but that would warrant a death sentence. I know this. That's why I would never behave that way. But for these other people, for these other nations who get angry and want to react and then want to feel justified in their reaction, it's absolutely crazy. But I'll stop there. Go ahead, Doc.
Karnak, you know, a while back, maybe a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, when the bombings were going on over in Israel, my mother had called me and she asked me if we were at war. And I took a long, deep pause. You know what I mean? And I guess probably about 5 seconds into my pause, she chimed in and said, "It's a yes or no question. It's a yes or no question," because she knew that I was where I was getting ready to go.
Yeah.
Now she spoke when she said if we were at war, she was speaking about America.
Right.
But in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, how do I summarize? So I simply told her, Mama, we've been at war since before you were born, and honestly, for the last 2,000 years.
Right. Exactly.
You know, anytime a people feel comfortable shooting you through a door
Right.
because you're confronting them about something that you said to their child,
Right.
and you feel like it's okay for you to shoot them. Anytime you go to a grocery store and just start lining people up because of their appearance and their melanin skin, this is a people who are at war.
Right.
So you know, this struggle has been our life, and you know, I think so many of our people have normalized it, and not only normalized it, you know, I too was once comfortable in this society, in this sick society. I was a active participant, you know. But you know, the Most High had other plans for me, and it was because of the injustice or the injustice that I've become to realize, you know, who we are and how we're supposed to be walking. So you know, I say that to say, you know, we're in for some difficult times. If those difficult times cause me to become aware and awaken, and still so many of our people not awake, what is the Abba going to do to get our attention? And you know, again, we know that eventually, you know, our mourning will be turned to joy. So, you know, we just gotta hold fast and patiently await those days.
Khan, that was well said, and that was a brilliant point, because we won't be going through heartache and heartbreak for that long. It's gonna come a time where this is gonna be behind us, and we're gonna be moving forward with all the goodness that the Most High had placed on us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. So, you know, I really feel bad for our adversaries, truthfully. And I'm not being funny by saying that. I mean, I literally feel bad for our adversaries, because you're not going to win. You won't win. You know, the prophecy is not on your side. Prophecy is on our side. And we've endured so much over these centuries. I mean, it's been centuries. This has not been, it's been millenniums, truthfully. We're talking about since the time of, we can go back to the Babylonians. We can go back even before then. Before the Babylonians, the Persians and the Medes. Before the Persians and the Medes, it was the doggone, who before them?
Before the Persians and the Medes, it was the Babylonians.
Oh, my bad.
So
Okay.
after the Persian and the Medes, it was the Greeks.
Yeah.
And then after the Greeks, the Romans, and after the Romans, it's, you know, the kingdom we're in today.
Right. Well, the Arabs, and then that's the kingdom that we're in today. So, I mean, everybody has had their hand against the children of Israel, and all of these people who have had their hand against the children of Israel, you can expect destruction, and that's just what it is. You know, I can't make that into something else. And whether you like it, believe it, understand it, or not, it is what it is. And when Hamashiach come, it's over with. All the crying, you don't matter how much cries, how many tears you cry, no matter how much gold you offer, no matter what you try to negotiate with. You know, the Mashiach is coming, and Ha'aba, the Most High Power, owns everything. So you can't bribe him. You can't. There's nothing you have that can bribe him. Nothing.
God.
So
scripture say, any nation that will not serve you will perish.
be utterly wasted.
Mm-hmm.
utterly wasted. Utterly mean completely. Completely wasted. He also says, I will make a full end in all the nations that have moved their hand against you, but I will not make a full end of you. So that's what I'm saying. Prophecy is not on your side. Prophecy is against you. And it's just a matter of time before prophecy comes to fruition. So, we watch these stories and we think about this historical content. And, I pray that Abba is watching us as we go through this. And he sees, when these things happen, we get this information and the hairs on our neck stands up and the goosebumps comes up our backs. And it's just so chilling. And so we feel so powerless. And so in a situation where, it just reminds us that this is captivity for us. And here, let me end right there because I'll keep going and going. We're going to end right there because we still got the scriptures study to get into. So we're going to go ahead and close out right here. We're going to close out as we always do. And as to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter number 12 and verse number 13, let us see the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important that we understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled, all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments, for this is the entire reason that we are here. I am Yakazaki Yahu, joined by my most esteemed Akinanaya, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah, Bahashim, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, wa baruki, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait until the Most High Power sends the Mashiach, Hamashiach, to rescue us from all these lands where we've been scattered. And we are put back and made again a nation and a people. 12 tribes, one family, one nation under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies under our feet. Until that day come, Shabbat Shalom, family.
Shabbat Shalom, Mr. Kai.
Praises to the